actually gets compromised under pressure when we are talking about the gap between policies and the lived reality? So, what actually gets compromised? What part of the policy get compromised? We can pick up the posh policy or the work from home or even the wellness policies that most of the organizations are talking about.
I think connecting all these points for the culture, if you look at uh, policy is not a testament that has been sent and people have to follow. You also have to educate people, make them understand. For example, I'm a part of POSH committee in our organization, and we moved from women centric to a gender neutral policy. Now there was a lot of exercise in explaining people what does that mean. Now, so first is education. Second is how do you implement it from culture perspective? Uh, how lenient and people focused are you when you're looking at these policies, or these are just an order from a Supreme Court that you have to deliver? Third is when these things are happening, are there any ambiguities in the policies? That's the first, I think, breakage point. Any ambiguity would lead to some kind of wrong decision or a step. So from the culture perspective, this whole chain has to complete. Then we can ensure that the policy is implemented perfectly.
Wonderful.
What I can add is that there's this concept of organizational equity and organizational justice. So, what happens when the policy fails at the implementation level is that organizational justice suffers. And when organizational justice suffers, when a person, an employee, feels that their issues have not been resolved satisfactorily, that they have not received just treatment, their equity in the organization drops. And therefore, you have a less engaged person. And it's not only this person who is less engaged, but people around, as he was explaining, what do you do when it comes to the test? How does the organization demonstrate whether it is living these values through their actions or not? And so that one incident can create a complete dissolution of the organizational equity which a group of people have had. For example, it could take only one bad experience for a woman employee for a lot of women employees to, even though they may not have personally experienced it, but to have empathy for that one person and to not feel very comfortable. And then that grapevine moves outside the organization and it impacts your talent pool as well. So I think this concept of organizational equity vis-a-vis organizational justice is critical in understanding what happens.
Also, the adherence and compliance then suffers because if it is too rigid or too difficult to understand, people, rather than asking questions, they will find loopholes to avoid that, rather than trying to understand what the policy says. They will try to use workarounds. So I think if that happens, then the policy actually does not really, it's not effective. It's not effective anymore, and people then tend to not adhere to it, or ignore or find ways to work around that.
Right. So, lack on communication. Yes.
See, and finally, one of the most important thing in an organization is culture starts from the top. If some people are involved in any of these policies violation and who are at the senior level, and if they can get away with things, then the natural flow through is it's only on paper. So it's very important that policies are implemented with the due intent and exceptions don't become the norm, because moment starts exceptions becoming the norm, and as she mentioned that then people lose trust in that policy, and then it's no more than just a paper, and people will always try to find how to navigate than to adhere.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything?
One point that I can add is, and this goes back to my initial learning phase as a young HR manager. I was asked to create a policy, and I created what I thought was a brilliant policy. Went to my boss, and the boss looked at it. It looks good, but have you talked to people? I said, why would I need to talk to people? I mean, this is the policy. And so he had an opinion. He said, young man, you need to. So I think the essence of that is the need to treat people as adults. Go and ask them. bata teri raza kya hai? What is it that you want? And it's not only the organization's burden to keep refining the policy. We should go keep having this dialogue and saying, is it working for you? If it's not working, what is your suggestion? And one would be surprised at the number of constructive suggestions and things that the user, uh, end user tells you, that helps you in building policy that is meaningful, relevant, and useful.
Right, right. That's a very good point. Periodically, if we review the policies, we ask our employees. In fact, that makes me also ask this question, and which most of you all have already answered, that there is a lack in psychological safety in the organizations, right? Due to which maybe most of the times employees fear to kind of adhere to certain elements of the policies. So, what's your say on that? Is it something to do with psychological safety? Do you feel that?
I think culturally, certainly psychological safety plays a big role. As you're aware, there are four components to psychological safety. It's the um, inclusion safety, learner safety. Learner is ability to make mistakes without having their consequences. Then you have um, a challenger safety, where you're able to challenge something which you don't think is right, and you're heard and your opinion is incorporated. And I think there is one more, which is contribution safety. Do you bring your capabilities and talents and add to the outcome of the team, mm, even before somebody asks you, or even if somebody doesn't ask you? Now, I think the challenge that I notice in our culture is the challenge for challenger safety, where people are very reluctant to say something that may sound negative, or which challenges the boss, or which challenges the existing system, because that's not seen as nice behavior or polite behavior. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges that I see. And the interesting thing is, and that reflects in some of the output that we see at an organizational level, people always say, why didn't we create a Google in India? And I think whenever you're looking at innovation and creativity, challenger safety is the biggest component for innovation and creativity. And I think culturally, we're yet to cross that bridge. We're there somewhere on that bridge, but we're yet some distance away.
I think I'll also build on this, and to the point you're speaking about the safety that needs to be there. But I also feel there is um, we are talking about examples where it's a black and white. So we are talking about posh, and that's how this conversation was starting off in there. But how much is the organization really walking the talk? And on a day-to-day basis, what are the team members and the team seeing things happen? Even about policies that aren't as clearly defined as posh in that sense as in there as well. And I'll pick examples. You'll have policies around what you can spend money on or what you can't. You'll have policies around, can I share my password or I can't share my password? Or you will have policies around what can be done at work or cannot be done at work. On a day-to-day basis, these smaller policies on how the manager and how the management is responding is important. So you'll have a policy in one organization might say, for entertainment, only the senior most will pay. But on the ground, when they go, they see the senior most saying, "Tum kar do, I'll approve your bill." Now, that is a policy for the right reason. While there'll be another one where if such thing happens, the manager is immediately asked to go. And so, how the organization is taking, or even in terms of, you know, those small exceptions that become a habit, and how the organization draws the line to say this is zero tolerance to this, and how will I respond to this? And when you see the action happening, it gives you the confidence to say, yes, once I have the psychological safety, I can bring it up and there will be a consistent action that will happen through and through. And that's the brand that the organization has built for itself that helps people come up.
So building on to his earlier point and just adding that the management thinks we know it all. So we had done a very interesting thing, which maybe some of the organizations are also doing, in terms of a reverse mentoring program, where the junior most people in the organization were identified as mentors for the senior most people in the organization, just to develop the habit of listening and to get the bottoms up feedback in terms of what is happening on the ground. Because some of them, as they mentioned, that sometimes we became so distant from the reality that we end up thinking that, okay, what we are doing is only working. But through this mechanism, at least we were forced to listen. And by being forced into that situation to listen, a lot of newer things and newer aspects which came to surface, which in isolation we would have never known. And through that, we were able to implement a lot of changes in the policy document, because policy versus the practice in reality were not matching over the years, but we were thinking that they are matching. So reverse mentoring program worked very well for us.
Wow, wow. We have in fact similar things in XLRI also.
So I think the challenge here is that, going back to what Tanay was saying, right? We are still, when we talk about what I would call as a steady state of affairs, all of these things are very real. Psychological safety, the confidence, the credibility, they're all nice. But I think what really matters is that what does an organization do under stress? That is what defines the organization, right? And the reality is that for every organization which is for profit, let's all that focus. I'm not even focused on non-profit. For profit, the bottom line is that, do I have a customer for my product stroke service? That's number one. If I don't have a customer, then I don't exist tomorrow morning. I'm dead, right? Number one. Number two, do I have a customer who is willing to pay for my product or service? Or do I have a proxy who's paying for the service and product which my customer is using? And then do I have a top line? Do I have bottom line? These are the fundamental tenets for any organization to survive and succeed. Rest everything else, right? Rest everything. I mean, what I'm saying might sound a little bit very contrasting or contradictory, but the reality is that when an organization pushed to the brink, employee is the last that any company thinks about. There has been hardly any case studies that I have come across where the company was under stress and said employee first. In good times, we can talk about all the culture, the psychological safety, the employee. When the things are not bad, it does not work. Because the bottom line is that if as a company, right, if I'm under stress, financial stress at this point of time, I've given a lot of commitment to my employees. Will I still do retrenchment? The answer is absolutely yes. Do I as a leader enjoy it? The answer is no. But I will do it because for me, fundamentally, the company's survival is very important. Okay? That's one. The another aspect of it is just a few days back, I was actually speaking in a panel at an IIT Kanpur GCC event. And one of the profs from IIT Kanpur actually asked me, Bipin, in this new world of this whole agentic and systems and AI agents, what is your idea about loyalty? I said, Professor, I'm going to say something which is very, very probably not acceptable in a public domain. But since we're a closed door, I said, IT industry today, with due respect, where I spent most of my career, are operating a model where we may desire loyalty, but we don't deserve loyalty. We are at this point, that's a reality of life, all of us are, right? So as leaders, we desire loyalty, but are we deserving loyalty? Because we are not reciprocate loyalty, right? I mean, if you look at the news over the last couple of years, right, since the advent of LLM, every day you think about companies which have trillions of dollars of valuation, hundreds of billions of dollars of cash, still letting go somebody. Why? Do they not have cash to keep the employee and retrain and reinvest? That's not the answer. The reason letting go is because the stock market is hitting them. And when the stock goes down, every exec, apart from the investor, their wealth is eroding. That's the reality of life, right? So therefore, I think it's nice to have the conversation of psychology, safety, employee first, culture, all of that. But I think it's very, very important for us to also be cognizant that bottom line as a company, we have to survive. Customer, revenue, bottom line, profitability is absolutely important. Rest everything gets compromised. To your point, you were earlier saying what gets compromised, right? If my customer, my revenue, or my profitability are at question, everything is up for game.